The palace nursery was a storm of claws and fire. Tiny dragons, no bigger than children, screeched and snapped at anyone who came near. Sparks flew from their mouths, scorching the polished stone floors. A trainer yelped as a hatchling lunged at his sleeve, leaving a deep burn. Another cried out as a dragon leaped onto a table, scattering vials and food bowls. Panic rippled through the room. Amid the chaos, a young human nurse named Elric stepped in. His heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. He carried only a small medkit, his fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the strap over his shoulder. Most of the palace staff had fled, shouting that the dragons were untamable, but Elric did not move back. Instead, he scanned the room quickly, looking for patterns in the dragon's movements. One hatchling, smaller than the rest, glowed faintly, almost like a soft lantern whenever it shrieked. Its eyes were wide, filled with fear but also curiosity. Elric crouched slightly, keeping his hands visible. "Easy, little one," he said, his voice calm and firm. Most humans would have panicked, but he understood instinctively that sudden moves would only make the dragon strike. A larger hatchling, scales shining like molten gold, roared suddenly, sending a shockwave through the room. Papers flew, alarms blared, and even the seasoned trainers stumbled. The noise was deafening, but Elric didn't falter. He lunged forward instinctively, shielding the smallest glowing hatchling with his body. Sparks sizzled dangerously close to his sleeve, but he stayed still, breathing slowly, murmuring reassurances. The little dragon hesitated, then pressed gently against him as if recognizing that he was no threat. A tiny spark jumped from its snout but dissipated harmlessly. Elric smiled faintly, feeling a small but meaningful victory. For the first time, a hatchling had not struck him, and the room seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The other dragons froze too, watching this unusual interaction. Who is that human?" a young trainer whispered from behind a toppled table. His voice trembled. Everyone else stared in disbelief. Elric ignored them. He focused entirely on the glowing hatchling. He noticed something strange. Its glow pulsed faster whenever a larger dragon roared or lunged nearby. It was reacting to the emotions of the others. There was intelligence here, far beyond instinct. Elric moved slowly to a small table with scattered feeding trays, using his body language to signal calm. The hatchling followed him cautiously, wings quivering. Another small win. Sparks flew around him, but none touched him directly. He adjusted his stance to block the larger dragons, gently murmuring to the frightened hatchling, who seemed to sense that he was trying to protect it. Then, without warning, a massive shadow fell across the room. The largest hatchling, almost the size of a full-grown horse, crashed through a support beam, sending splinters flying. Trainers screamed and dove for cover. The ground shook beneath its weight. Elric's stomach lurched, but he didn't run. Instead, he threw himself in front of the glowing hatchling again, holding his arms wide to shield it. The dragon roared directly at him, flames licking the stone floor. Something remarkable happened. The little hatchling chirped, a soft, high-pitched sound that seemed almost like words. The huge dragon froze, head cocked as if listening. Sparks sputtered from its mouth, then stopped. Elric blinked. The glowing hatchling moved closer to him, nudging his shoulder gently. That small touch was enough to make him realize the impossible. The dragons were not mindless beasts. They were communicating, sensing each other's fear, anger, and trust. Breathless but steady, Elric looked at the largest dragon. "You're angry, scared, confused," he said quietly. The massive creature tilted its head, watching him. No one else had ever tried to speak to them like this. No one had ever tried to understand. He reached into his medkit and pulled out a small, soft cloth, waving it gently toward the glowing hatchling. It stepped forward cautiously, brushing its tiny snout against it. Sparks flared briefly, then vanished. Elric exhaled slowly, feeling a flicker of hope. One hatchling was no longer fighting him. One tiny connection had been made. But then the largest dragon shifted, wings spreading wide. Its eyes glowed, not with anger, but with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. It leaned forward, low to the ground, wings poised to strike or defend, he couldn't tell which. The room went silent, even the screaming trainers seemed frozen in time. A chill ran down Elric's spine. The hatchlings around it quivered, waiting. Every instinct screamed that he should step back, but he didn't. His hand hovered near his medkit, ready to react, but his mind raced faster than his body. He had no idea what the huge dragon would do next. One wrong move and everyone would be burned, crushed, or worse. Then, in a shocking twist, the massive dragon crouched, and instead of attacking, it let out a low, rumbling sound almost like a growl, but not of anger. The glowing hatchling chirped in response, its soft light pulsing brighter. Elric froze, heart hammering. Something had changed. Something no one expected. The palace nursery was no longer just chaos. It was a puzzle, and he had just taken the first terrifying step into solving it. And then, from the corner of the room, a soft, almost whispering sound reached his ears, something in the dragon's language, a word only he seemed to understand. Elric's eyes widened. They're trying to tell me something. Before he could react further, the largest hatchling's eyes locked onto him, a spark of recognition and danger gleaming in its gaze. Elric's heart raced as he watched the largest hatchling hover in place, its massive wings trembling slightly. The glowing hatchling pressed closer to him, letting out a soft, almost musical chirp. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning: trust, fear, curiosity. Every instinct screamed that he had to act carefully. One wrong move, and the palace nursery could erupt into fire and chaos again. "Easy, easy," he murmured, stepping slowly toward a toppled table. Sparks sizzled in the air, but none struck him directly. The hatchlings scattered around the room, their eyes following his movements. Elric noticed that each reacted differently to the other's emotions. When one hissed, the others flinched or brightened. Their energy was contagious, like a chain reaction he could sense but had never experienced before. The Emperor's advisor, an older man with a sharp face, stumbled forward. "Human, do you realize what you're doing?" he demanded. "They could burn this entire wing to ash." Elric ignored him. He knelt slowly, holding out a small feeding bowl. "I just want to help," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving the largest hatchling. "I'm not here to fight." The largest hatchling hissed, sparks jumping from its teeth, but didn't attack. Its eyes narrowed, watching him, and something shifted. Elric realized he needed more than calm words. He needed to show them he could be trusted through action. He picked up a shard of a broken tray, a simple move to show the hatchlings that he wasn't hiding anything, that he could manipulate the environment without hurting them. One of the smaller dragons cautiously stepped closer. It sniffed the shard, then tapped it lightly with its snout. A small flare of sparks jumped from it, fizzled, and vanished harmlessly. Elric's pulse quickened. One small success, a tiny proof that communication was possible. A loud crash suddenly echoed as another hatchling knocked over a stack of bowls. Trainers panicked, shouting orders, but Elric kept his calm. He moved quickly, shielding a frightened apprentice from a snapping tail. "Stay down," he instructed, his voice firm but gentle. The apprentice froze, then obeyed. The young human's courage and quick thinking prevented injury, small victories building confidence in the chaos. Elric crouched beside the glowing hatchling, watching its faint light pulse with each breath. He tentatively placed his hand on its back, careful not to startle it. The warmth radiated from its small body, and for a moment, the world outside the nursery seemed to vanish. The hatchling's eyes softened. Sparks flickered harmlessly over his gloves. He felt a connection forming, a bond stronger than instinct alone. Then came the roar. The largest hatchling lunged forward, its wings slicing the air. Trainers scrambled, but Elric stood his ground. He held out both hands, palms open, and moved slowly, deliberately, mirroring the dragon's tension with his own body language. The massive creature froze inches from him, scales shimmering like molten gold. Its roar faded into a low rumble, eyes locked on him. Elric realized something important. Force would never work here. The dragons didn't respond to strength, they responded to understanding. Every motion, every tone, every small gesture mattered. He adjusted his stance again, breathing steadily, projecting calm even as the room trembled with tension. A small flare of sparks shot from one of the smaller hatchlings, igniting a cloth on the floor. Elric's reflexes were instant. He grabbed the cloth, smothering the flames before anyone could panic further. The small action drew the hatchling's attention. The glowing hatchling chirped, nudging him with its snout, almost approving the quick thinking. Another tiny win, another hint that he could guide them. The Emperor's advisor muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "No human has ever survived 5 minutes in here, let alone controlled them." Elric didn't respond. He was too focused, too aware that every movement counted. He noticed that the hatchling's behavior had subtle patterns. Small shifts in tail position, the flare of their wings, the pulse of their glowing bodies. Each signal contained information. He could read them if he acted fast enough. A sudden crash made him turn. The glowing hatchling squealed as another dragon barreled toward it. Without thinking, Elric jumped between them, using his body to shield the smaller creature. Sparks flew, searing the stone floor, but he held his ground. The small hatchling pressed close, trusting him completely. Elric's heart pounded, but he smiled faintly, another small victory. Then he noticed something he hadn't before. The dragons were not just reacting to him, they were reacting to each other. The roar of the largest hatchling sent the smaller ones trembling, but when he positioned himself carefully, he could influence their reactions, calming one with a hand gesture, deflecting the aggression of another with a slow step. He could manipulate the chaos without touching fire. The room fell into a tense rhythm. Sparks flickered, wings beat, scales glimmered, but no one else had been injured. Elric had started a fragile chain of control, tiny threads of trust weaving through the room. The Emperor's advisors whispered in awe, unsure whether to be amazed or terrified. Just as Elric allowed himself a brief moment of hope, a sound echoed from the far corner, a low, rolling growl that none of the trainers had noticed before. It was deep, almost intelligent. The largest hatchling turned sharply, ears pricked, wings flaring. The glow of the small dragon intensified, pulsing faster than before. Elric froze. Something had changed. The dragons were signaling him, or warning him, about something he could not yet understand. His instincts screamed danger, yet curiosity forced him to stay. He had survived the first storm, but now a new hidden threat waited, and whatever it was, it wanted his attention. A low, whispering hiss rolled through the nursery, and all the dragons' heads turned toward the same spot. The glowing hatchling chirped urgently, nudging Elric's shoulder. His pulse quickened. This isn't just chaos anymore, something else is here. Before he could move closer to investigate, the largest hatchling snapped its head toward him, eyes wide with both recognition and warning. Sparks leapt from its mouth like a living whip. Elric inhaled sharply, his mind racing. One wrong step and everything could explode. Yet, in that instant he knew he could not back down. The dragons were testing him, challenging him, and he had no choice but to rise to it. The whispering hiss grew louder, almost like a word he could almost understand, pulling him toward a shadow in the corner. The nursery held its breath, and so did Elric. Something was coming. Elric's eyes followed the shadow at the far corner of the nursery. The whispering hiss had grown louder, almost forming a pattern, like a language he couldn't yet understand. The dragons all stared at the same spot, their bodies tense, wings flickering in nervous rhythm. The glowing hatchling pressed against his side, nudging him forward. It was urging him, and he knew instinctively that whatever was there was important. He stepped carefully, keeping his hands open and his movements slow. The largest hatchling shifted, lowering its massive body but not attacking. Sparks flickered harmlessly over the floor as if testing him. Elric swallowed, his mind racing. He had calmed the chaos for now, but this was different. Something intelligent was calling the dragon's attention, and possibly his. A thin crack appeared in the far wall. At first he thought it was just damage from the hatchling's earlier rampage. But as he watched, a faint, pulsating light shimmered through the fissure, echoing the glow of the smallest hatchling. Elric knelt, examining it. The light seemed to respond to the dragon's emotions. When the glowing hatchling chirped softly, the light brightened. When the largest hatchling rumbled, it flickered. Elric realized it wasn't just a wall, it was some kind of hidden conduit connected to the dragons themselves. His heart pounded. This could explain everything, he thought. Why the hatchlings are so reactive. Why they seem intelligent beyond instinct. Before he could move closer, a sharp cry rang out. The glowing hatchling had leapt onto the floor near the wall, claws skittering over stone, tail whipping nervously. It chirped urgently, nudging him forward again. The other hatchlings began circling him, eyes bright, wings twitching in anticipation. He felt the electricity in the air, not just from sparks, but from the dragon's collective tension. Elric placed a hand gently on the glowing hatchling's back. Its pulse matched the light through the wall. They're linked, he realized. The dragons were not just alive, they were networked. Their instincts, emotions, and maybe even thoughts were connected through this strange energy. His mind spun with questions, but there was no time for fear. The dragons needed him to act. He reached into his medkit and pulled out a small cloth, waving it near the glowing hatchling. The little creature sniffed, then pressed its snout against it. Sparks flickered briefly, then vanished harmlessly. Elric exhaled. A tiny success, a sign that he could communicate indirectly through their shared energy. The largest hatchling shifted again, rumbling low. Its eyes, golden and molten, fixed on him. He held its gaze steadily. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hands, moving them in gentle arcs to mirror the creature's tension. The hatchling stiffened, then relaxed slightly. Sparks sputtered harmlessly around its claws, a clear sign that it was testing him, but accepting him at the same time. Elric's mind raced. He had discovered something crucial. The dragon's behavior wasn't random. It was guided by a hidden intelligence that responded to trust, calm, and careful observation. If he could understand this, he might truly tame them, not with force but with connection. The whispering hiss grew louder again, and Elric realized it was coming from the fissure. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The light pulsed in rhythm with the hiss like a heartbeat. And then it happened. A soft, almost melodic word echoed in his mind. Not sound but meaning. Danger, approach, observe. Elric froze, understanding. This was a warning, not a threat. He turned slowly, glancing at the glowing hatchling. It chirped, its tiny wings vibrating with nervous energy, urging him forward. He nodded slightly. I understand. I'll be careful. He placed a hand on the wall near the fissure. Immediately, sparks danced along his fingers, but not painful ones. The energy from the dragon seemed to flow into the wall, and the wall's light pulsed stronger. The hatchlings all quieted, watching him intently. Elric realized that the dragons had been trying to show him the secret all along. Their fire, their chaos, their intelligence, it was connected to something ancient in the palace, a hidden force they themselves barely understood. A sudden crash snapped him from his thoughts. A beam above the nursery shifted, threatening to fall. Instinctively, Elric lunged forward, using his shoulder to push the glowing hatchling out of danger. Sparks flew close to his sleeve, but he didn't flinch. The other hatchlings scattered, watching the human act with courage. One small claw tapped his wrist in a gesture that felt like thanks. Elric's chest heaved. One moment, chaos. The next, clarity. He had discovered a hidden pattern, a network linking the dragons, and his quick thinking had earned their trust. For a heartbeat, the nursery was quiet, the only sound the faint hum from the fissure and the dragon's breathing. Then a voice boomed from behind him. The Emperor had entered, silent until now, his eyes fixed on Elric and the dragons. What are you doing, human? He demanded. His tone was neither angry nor impressed. It was sharp, curious, calculating. The room froze. Even the dragons seemed to sense the tension. Elric didn't back down. He held the glowing hatchling close, meeting the Emperor's gaze steadily. I'm listening, he said simply. They're trying to tell me something. They're not just beasts, they're connected. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Connected? He echoed. Then he leaned slightly forward, almost as if he sensed the same strange pulse that Elric felt. No one has ever understood them. Elric nodded. The largest hatchling moved closer, eyes fixed on him, scales shimmering. Sparks flared harmlessly. The glowing hatchling chirped, brushing against his chest. They trust me, for now, he thought. But he also knew the danger wasn't over. The fissure pulsed stronger, almost alive, and the whispering hiss grew insistent. Something was coming, something ancient, something the dragons feared. His fingers tingled from the energy, and a thought struck him cold. The hatchlings weren't just untamable, they were guardians, connected to something far bigger than anyone in the palace understood. Elric inhaled sharply, heart racing, and stepped toward the fissure. The dragons followed, eyes bright, wings twitching. Every step was a risk. Every movement mattered. But he had already taken the first step into a mystery that could change everything. And then, as he reached the glowing crack, the wall shuddered violently. A low, booming growl filled the room, deep, resonant, and terrifying. The hatchlings hissed in unison, their small bodies vibrating with energy. Elric froze. Something alive, something enormous, was behind the wall. Before he could react, the fissure split wider, revealing a glimpse of something he had never imagined, and the whispering hiss turned into a voice, speaking directly to him. Human, the time has come. Elric's heart hammered in his chest as the fissure widened. The whispering hiss had become a voice, low and urgent, echoing in his mind. The hatchlings pressed close to him, their tiny bodies quivering, wings flicking nervously. Even the largest dragon, the molten gold one, crouched low, its eyes fixed on him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Sparks sizzled from its claws, lighting the nursery in flickering gold and red. He took a careful step forward, holding his hands open. I'm not here to hurt anyone, he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. The glowing hatchling chirped softly in response, its pulse quickening. The energy from the fissure seemed to sync with the dragon's heartbeat. Elric realized that the creatures were not only intelligent, they were connected to this force in a way that no human had ever witnessed before. A sudden crash shattered the fragile calm. A beam above the nursery groaned, threatening to collapse. Trainers screamed and scrambled for cover. Without thinking, Elric dove forward, shielding the glowing hatchling with his body. Sparks flared across the stone floor, licking his sleeves. He could feel the heat against his skin, but adrenaline kept him moving. The molten gold hatchling lunged toward the beam, snapping its jaws to stabilize it. Elric froze, astonished. The dragon had acted to protect him, risking its own safety. "See," he shouted to the panicked trainers. "They're not just animals. They understand." No one moved. The room was frozen in awe and fear. Elric's chest heaved as he helped the glowing hatchling to its feet, brushing ash from its tiny scales. Another small victory, but the danger was far from over. Then the wall behind the fissure trembled violently. A low growl reverberated through the room, deep and resonant, unlike anything Elric had heard before. The hatchlings hissed, wings vibrating, tails lashing. Sparks flared from their mouths, illuminating the terrified faces of the trainers and advisors. The molten gold hatchling roared, a sound so powerful it shook the stone floor. Elric realized instantly, whatever was behind the wall was enormous. Far larger than any hatchling, perhaps a dragon from legend. His pulse quickened, but he didn't step back. He had come this far. He could not abandon the creatures that trusted him. "Stay calm," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He crouched slightly, hands raised, mirroring the stance of the molten gold hatchling. The energy in the room was alive, thrumming with tension. Sparks flickered across the floor, rising like fireflies. The glowing hatchling pressed against him, its tiny claws digging lightly into his chest. A shadow moved in the widening fissure. Elric's breath caught. A massive eye appeared, glimmering with intelligence and something darker, power ancient and untamed. The voice in his mind whispered again, "Human, the time has come." Elric swallowed. His instincts screamed danger, but his mind raced for solutions. Force would fail. Panic would fail. Only understanding, courage, and quick thinking might survive this. He stepped closer, hands still raised, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Sparks danced around him, harmless for now. The molten gold hatchling shifted beside him, wings spread protectively. Suddenly, the enormous creature behind the wall surged forward, pushing the fissure wider. The nursery trembled. Trainers screamed, knocking over trays and vials. Sparks erupted from the largest hatchling's claws as it lunged toward the new threat. Elric moved in front of the glowing hatchling, shielding it instinctively. His pulse raced, adrenaline pumping, but he felt something extraordinary. The dragons were listening to him, following him, trusting him. He took a deep breath. "I understand you," he said softly, stepping closer to the fissure. "I want to help, not harm. I can guide them." A wave of energy pulsed from the fissure. The hatchlings recoiled for a moment, but then, slowly, they aligned themselves around him, forming a protective circle. Sparks flared harmlessly in the air, the molten gold hatchling roaring in defiance. Elric's chest heaved, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The ancient force behind the wall was testing him, and the dragons were ready to fight beside him. With careful precision, he reached into his medkit, pulling out a small cloth. He waved it near the glowing hatchling, which pressed against it, emitting a soft chirp. The energy pulsed stronger in response. Elric's mind raced. If he could synchronize with the dragon's energy, he might be able to calm the larger force, or at least guide it away from destruction. The enormous eye blinked slowly, studying him. Sparks flickered around the fissure as if the creature was breathing fire through the walls. Elric stepped forward another inch, careful to keep his balance. The molten gold hatchling mirrored his movements, wings beating in perfect rhythm. The glowing hatchling chirped urgently, tail flicking. Suddenly, a surge of light shot from the fissure, blinding him for a moment. The massive creature behind it roared, shaking the entire room. Elric felt the heat, the energy, the raw power of something ancient and alive. He could have backed away, could have fled, but he didn't. He focused on the hatchlings, on their trust, on the connection he had begun to forge. Then, in a shocking moment, the molten gold hatchling roared and leaped toward the fissure, flames sparking harmlessly over Elric's shoulders. The glowing hatchling pressed against him, and together, they began to guide the massive creature's energy. Slowly the growl softened. The pulsing light dimmed, then flickered gently as if the force was testing him, acknowledging him. Elric's chest heaved. He had done the impossible. He had calmed the chaos, connected with the dragons, and faced a force that no human had survived before. Sparks still danced in the air, but they no longer threatened destruction. The hatchlings pressed closer to him, eyes bright with trust. But as he looked up, the fissure began to shimmer differently. Through the crack, he saw a shape he had never imagined. Another creature, larger than any dragon he had seen, its scales glittering with a strange ancient light. Its eyes met his, intelligent, probing, and something in them whispered of a greater challenge ahead. Elric swallowed hard. He had survived the surge, but this was only the beginning. The whispering voice returned, clearer this time. "Human, your courage is noted. But the test has only begun." And then the nursery door rattled violently as if something massive was trying to enter, and the hatchlings all stiffened, wings spread, tails lashing. Elric's heart raced. He gritted his teeth. This is it, the moment that will define everything. Elric's chest heaved as he faced the fissure, now wide enough to reveal the full creature beyond. Its scales shimmered like molten silver, wings folded tightly, eyes sharp and intelligent. The hatchlings pressed close to him, wings twitching, tiny claws tapping against the stone floor. He could feel their energy, excitement, fear, trust, all vibrating through him. He had never been so aware of the weight of life, of choice, of consequence. The massive creature growled low, a sound that vibrated the walls, yet it didn't move forward. Elric realized it was watching him, testing him, reading him. One misstep, and the entire nursery could erupt into fire and destruction. But he had no intention of stepping back. The glowing hatchling chirped urgently, nudging him forward, and he knew it was counting on him to act with courage and clarity. He knelt slowly, palms open and steady. "I'm here to help," he said, voice calm but firm. "I want to understand you, not harm you." Sparks flickered from the molten gold hatchling's claws as if emphasizing the urgency, yet they stayed harmless. The smaller dragons mirrored his stance, tails twitching in harmony, wings trembling slightly. Elric could feel their energy weaving together, a network of trust he had never experienced. The massive creature shifted its weight, letting out a soft hiss. Its eyes glimmered like molten metal, scanning him from head to toe. Elric held his gaze, refusing to flinch. He took a cautious step forward, letting his hands move slowly in arcs, mirroring the energy he felt pulsing from the fissure. The glow from the wall pulsed in rhythm with the dragon's heartbeat, and for a brief moment, the nursery was silent except for the hiss of energy and the shallow breaths of the hatchlings. Then, something extraordinary happened. The glowing hatchling chirped again, and sparks danced along its tiny snout. The massive creature tilted its head, listening. It was as if the smallest dragon had sent a signal, a thread of communication bridging their worlds. Elric's mind raced. He had to act on instinct and reason at the same time. One wrong move and trust could shatter instantly. He reached into his medkit and pulled out a small cloth, waving it gently toward the glowing hatchling. It pressed against it, chirping softly, tail flicking. The massive creature's eyes softened, and it lowered its head slightly, wings still folded but relaxed. Sparks danced harmlessly over the floor. Elric exhaled slowly. One step. One connection. One moment of understanding. The molten gold hatchling roared, flapping its wings, and the other small dragons joined in, forming a circle around him. The massive creature tilted its head, then exhaled a low, warm breath. Sparks erupted gently, harmlessly, filling the room with light and heat but causing no damage. Elric realized the truth. The dragons were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent, moral, and capable of forming bonds. And he had proven himself worthy of that trust. He stood fully, brushing ash from his sleeve. The glowing hatchling chirped, climbing onto his shoulder. The massive dragon lowered its head until their eyes met. A pulse of understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement. He had faced danger, acted with courage, and shown empathy. The dragons had accepted him. The Emperor stepped forward, eyes wide. I have never seen anything like this," he admitted. "No human has ever survived here, let alone done this." Elric shook his head, still watching the dragons. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "They were trying to tell me something. We had to understand each other." The molten gold hatchling flared its wings once more, sparks arcing into the air harmlessly, and the smaller hatchlings chirped in unison. The massive creature behind the fissure exhaled slowly, its scales glimmering softly. The nursery had gone from chaos to harmony in moments, a testament to patience, observation, and courage. For a heartbeat, the palace was silent. Then the massive creature spoke, not in words but in a low, resonant vibration that Elric felt in his chest. "You understand. You are worthy." The glow from the fissure dimmed slightly as if acknowledging the end of its test. Elric's pulse quickened. He had faced impossible odds, navigated danger, and formed a bond with creatures no human had ever reached before. He knelt again, letting the glowing hatchling rest on his shoulder. Sparks flickered gently, harmlessly. "We'll protect each other," he whispered. The massive creature lowered its massive head closer, eyes locked on him, then slowly retreated back into the fissure, leaving only a soft shimmer of light. The hatchlings chirped softly, nuzzling him, wings fluttering in quiet celebration. The Emperor exhaled, awe and relief mingling in his expression. "You've done the impossible," he said. "These hatchlings, they respect you." Elric smiled faintly, feeling exhaustion but also triumph. "Not just respect," he said. "Trust. And that is stronger than fear or fire." The nursery had transformed. Where chaos had reigned, now there was order, connection, and understanding. Elric had shown that human courage, intelligence, and empathy could shine even in the face of impossible odds. He had earned the trust of creatures that no one else could approach, and in doing so, he had discovered a new path forward for humans and dragons alike. But as he straightened, the glowing hatchling chirped sharply, wings flicking nervously. Elric followed its gaze to the fissure, now closed but faintly shimmering. Something lingered behind it, an energy ancient and alive, that hadn't fully revealed itself. Elric's pulse quickened. This isn't over. He looked at the hatchlings surrounding him. They chirped in agreement, tails flicking, wings trembling. Whatever lay beyond the fissure was still there, waiting. And Elric knew one thing with certainty. He would face it just as he had faced everything else. The Emperor's advisor whispered, awestruck, "Human, you have changed everything here." Elric nodded, eyes fixed on the faint shimmer of the wall. "We've only begun," he said softly. "And the real test is still to come." The hatchlings chirped in unison, almost like a chorus as sparks flickered gently around them. Elric felt a thrill of anticipation. A challenge waited beyond the walls, something larger, more ancient, more powerful. And for the first time he felt ready.